Welcome to the Opinion Pending Podcast. I am here with Kristie, and I am king shit of Fuck Mountain, and we're just kind of jumping in today. What are we talking about, Kristie?
I was going to tell you about the Khamar Daban incident of 1993. So back in 1993, a group of 9 hikers led by Ludmila Korovina. She was an experienced survivalist and hiker. She and her daughter.
So basically people would hire her and they'd go out and...
Well, yeah, she had
like a tour
people
guide
that
kind of
she
thing.
went with and knew regularly.
Not necessarily like a tour guide, but you know what I mean. Like,
yeah, she was known well enough to know that she knew what she was doing. And people went with her in confidence. Yeah.
So if you were looking
to
travel, you would pay this lady and she would lead you around.
I don't know if she was like a paid position or if it was just like an expedition she did with some students. She was an instructor and survivalist and had students, but I think she literally was teaching them how to hike and do survivalist things. But her daughter was 16 and she also knew well enough that she was part of a different group of hikers that was on the mountain range on the same day as her mom and the other group was, along with a different group that was separate. So there were like 3 or 4 different groups on the mountain when this happened on the same day.
So basically, Ludmila
is the instructor.
And then
I'm going to tell you the names of her troop of 6 students that she took with.
Is it relevant that her daughter was also on the mountain at the same time, or does that not really play into it?
It plays a little part in like the timeline of what happened, but like not really important that she was there. It's just kind of, it's more important to theories later. But Ludmila was the leader, obviously, and she had a group of 6, and those consisted of 23-year-old Alexander, who she had known for most of his life, and he was, basically family. The other 5 were 24-year-old Tatiana, 19-year-old Denis, 17-year-old Valentina, 16-year-old Victoria, and 15-year-old Timur. So, on August 2nd, 1993, the group went to the mountain range.
It's just like college kids, right? Like just
no,
friends?
They're like young. Like they range from like 24 down to 15.
Okay.
So I think the oldest is 20.
Like same school or just like happen to be friends type deal?
I don't know, actually. Okay. I'm assuming they're just people that all signed up for her classes to learn how to do this.
Oh, right. Okay.
But, sense. I don't know that much, so don't quote me on that part of it. Okay. But on August 2nd, 1993, the group arrives at the mountain range, which is Khamar Daban. And the weather is supposed to be clear. It's forecasted to be sunny skies, no rain, no snow, no nothing. So Ludmila and her students were one of 3 different groups that were hiking in the area that day. Which I told you before, one of them was also led by her own daughter. Her name's Natalia. They were hiking on the same range, but they weren't hiking together. So they had made plans to meet up and kind of cross paths with each other on different hiking routes. And so they had planned to meet up on August 5th, which is a point at which their plans were supposed to cross. Because they weren't on the same exact path. They were just on the same range.
So basically at this point, you and our troops meet there, right?
Yeah, they all have different groups and they're all following not an identical hiking trail.
Right.
They're just all on the same mountain range doing their own hiking.
Right.
So they find out that they have similar paths that cross, and so they meet up to see how they're going along during that.
And this is like a long trip, right? Like it's obvious, it's like each trip's like probably a couple days, like a week or something, or...
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be a few days.
Right.
But it's also something that, they've all been pretty trained in this. It's not like something you do as, a beginner.
Right. It's like an advanced...
Intermediate advanced.
Yeah. So it's not just a hike in the woods. This is a...
Right.
We are trained, we are prepared, we brought our stuff, and we're going out.
Right. This is something they had prepared for months to go on.
Right, okay.
And they were taking this as kind of like a expedition as experienced hikers. It was time to put all that to the test and, go on a more serious hike. So, the first 2 days of the hike went way better than had been planned. They made really good time. They were beginning their descent. And the forecast turned out to be wrong. And a big thunderstorm hit. Mm-hmm. Basically, a bunch of their supplies got soaked through. And they were slowed down by all the excess weight from things being heavier from being soaked. Right. So, they started getting pretty exhausted pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. Because, can you imagine?
All the excess pounds are...
all these, huge backpacks in the first place. Yeah. And then they're all just wet down, and your clothes are wet, and everything's wet, and you're just, trying to hike up a mountain.
Plus, what you're carrying anyways is probably heavy, because it's enough supplies and different things.
Well, it did say they were on the descent, though, so it may have been easier than going up, so I guess they were fortunate in that way.
Right.
But since they were getting pretty tired, Ludmilla decided that they should stop for a while and camp. And she picked this location that was more open, even though there was more tree cover nearby. Mm-hmm. And they were not able to build a fire, but it was reported that they were, in good spirits. Because I will explain where all this information is coming from later.
Okay.
But the next morning, they were able to build a fire. And they ate breakfast before heading up and out for their next, stretch of hike. And they planned to meet up with Natalia that day. And were expecting to be able to get there because of how quickly they had made time before. Natalia and her group, they got to the spot where they were supposed to meet. Mm-hmm. They had never showed up.
Right.
Her mom's troop never showed up.
Mm-hmm.
So she figured that, since it rained unexpectedly and they probably got slowed down a little bit, they probably just, ended up a little bit behind schedule. So she would just move on and meet her at the next spot where they were planning to meet up. And it wasn't anything to worry about. So they set out in the first place on August 2nd. We're supposed to meet up on August 5th. Mm-hmm. And the next part happens on August 10th. Just 5 days later. A group of kayakers are going down, and they notice that something is in the tree line as they're paddling downriver. Mm-hmm. This is down at the base of the mountain.
Right.
And what they see is a girl, and she's standing on the banks. And she is, trying to get attention. She's looking at them. She's by herself. Mm-hmm. And so they get out of the kayaks and they go over. And it kind of varies. Some sources say that she's covered in blood. Some don't. Okay. But they basically go and they approach her and they try to see what she's doing, what's wrong. Mm-hmm. Why is she alone in the middle of the mountains, right? And it says that she became hysterical when she tried to tell them the story. And eventually, she identifies herself as one of the 6 hikers that was with Ludmilla. This is Valentina.
Okay.
She tells them that she has been hiking with 6 others. So they take her to the nearest police station and they file a report. But she didn't tell anything about what happened until years later.
Okay.
People chalk this up to, well, it depends. Some people think this is dubious. Some people think that it's just the PTSD trauma situation where she just couldn't bring herself to talk about what she saw until years later. I don't know what I think,
kind of up in the air.
But it's, I think, at the very least, it's just unfortunate that she took that long to talk about it. Because, what if something could have been helped? Right.
Was she, kept in custody or anything like that? I mean, because if there's, an ongoing investigation of, 5 people going missing in the woods and there's one person who did survive, I figured, police forces would probably, want to
Well, it's not like they don't find things that, right. She just didn't clarify what she saw till later.
Oh, okay. Okay, I misunderstood.
So, basically, this is what she ends up opening up about later. And she says that after eating breakfast, after, making the fire and eating breakfast on, I think this is the 5th, right? Mm-hmm. They started off down the mountain. But after only a few minutes, Alexander, who was at the very back of the group,
right,
he started screaming.
Okay.
So everyone turned and they saw him, and he had basically fallen to the ground, and he was writhing around, and he was foaming at the mouth, and he was bleeding from his eyes and his ears, and just, right, blood's pouring out everywhere. So he's convulsing and screaming, and then he stops moving. He's still and not responding anymore. So Ludmilla runs over, and she tells all the rest of them to stay back and, continue going down the hill. And she, because this is Alexander, this is the one that she's known the longest, and that is basically family to her.
Okay.
She runs over to him, and she's distraught, and she's trying to, revive him and see what the heck's going on. And while she's doing this, the group that kept going, all of a sudden hears her start to cry out as well. So, they all turn around and see what's going on with her, and she's doing the exact same thing. She's all of a sudden bleeding out of her eyes, bleeding out of her ears, and her frothing at the mouth. She starts convulsing. She falls down next to Alex, and she stops moving.
Something similar to, not so much the blood out of the eyes, but a seizure type thing.
Kind of something's going on, because...
Right.
So next, Tatiana, she runs over to Ludmilla to try to help her, because she's collapsed on top of Alex. And they're both not moving. And she goes over there, and she starts to collapse as well. But before she does, she starts clawing at her throat. She can't breathe. Something's wrong. And she crawls over to a rock that's nearby and starts bashing her head on a rock.
And this is all reported by, who's it? Valentina, okay. And it's the lady who, basically years later, she's coming out and telling...
A couple of years later.
Basically this is what happened now, or whatever. She came back out and started
talking about it. She basically was mute about it, yeah. And then, okay. So she says Tatiana went over to try to help Ludmilla after she collapsed. Then she starts clawing at her throat like she can't breathe, and she goes over and starts bashing her head on a rock. Until she... Some
psychic break
bashing on her head, her head, she collapses.
Okay.
And stops moving. So now, Victoria and Timur both ran away while Dennis hid behind a rock. Valentina said that she stood there, she just froze, because she just watched a bunch of her friends, collapse, stop moving, and one just bashed her head in. And so she was just watching them, and, just dying in front of her.
Right.
So she's kind of shell-shocked. She's just sitting there when everyone else was running and hiding. And Victoria and Timur collapsed while running away, and they died in a similar way. They, started throwing up and blood and frothing and collapsing and convulsing. So now, it's just Valentina and Dennis.
Right.
Dennis is out there hiding behind a rock, and she's standing there frozen. Realizing that they were the only ones left, they both, ran to each other, and they started running away down the side of the mountain. But not long after that, Dennis collapsed while they're running away.
Same manner.
And it's the same kind of, thing. Starts convulsing. Valentina didn't stop. She just kept on running. She didn't try to go back and help him. She didn't do it. She just kept going. Down. Just keep going. So that's basically what she told them. I'm the only one here, and everyone else just collapsed and died. And
everyone got struck by this weird something rather and went crazy and died.
Yeah, so she got out with just whatever she had with her, which was her clothes and a little pack for supplies and I think a tent. She says she ran down the mountain until she felt far enough away that she was going to be okay. And then she set up a tent and fell asleep. When she woke up, and she realized that she hadn't died because she's awoken.
Right.
That's when she knew that she would need to, figure something out quick because she didn't have much. She's by herself now. And if she was going to survive by herself in the wilderness, she needed to, she'd have to get something. So she decided that she would make her way back up the mountain, back to the site where they'd all died. And I don't know why she would do this. That would be the last thing I want to do. Especially
you said for supplies and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I understand that part of it, but I don't understand Like, if you had a solid explanation
you'd basically
of what
want
just
to be
happened.
Anywhere else.
Yeah, because I don't know. I can't figure out what that was.
Yeah, because, well, I mean, like, this just, like, pops in my head, but I'm like, okay, airborne disease or something. I don't freaking know. There's some weird thing going on. I don't want to go up there.
Like, if you knew it was, like, an animal attack, you're like, the animal's probably not there anymore.
Right.
And I maybe go back and grab stuff. But, like, this is like, I don't know what's going on. I don't really want to risk going back to the same spot.
Right.
But she did, and so she goes back, and she retraces her steps and goes back up. And when she reaches it, she saw that basically all the bodies are in the same spot. Like, nobody's been moved, they're just still exactly where they'd fallen.
Okay.
And she knew they were all dead. She knew that. So she went through and she took supplies and she started back down again. She was making her way by following the power lines down the mountain. So for 4 days, she follows these, and that's when she ends up at the river, and the kayakers find her after that.
Right.
No search was conducted until the 24th of August, even though they'd filed a police report.
This was when? When did she get back, or when was the police report first filed?
I think it was August. I didn't say when the police report was filed. It just says that the search wasn't conducted until the 24th, even though there was a report filed before that.
Do you remember when she got found?
I think she was found on the 10th. They set out on the 2nd, and then the 5th was when the fire happened, and they tried to build the fire and couldn't do it.
And then 4 days later, she was with the hikers, or with the canoers, right? So
10th is
basically
when she was found by the kayak.
Yeah, so about 2 more weeks until they started sending people out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So since she, wasn't talking yet, it took them a couple days to actually find where the spot was that they were and find the bodies. They, took the bodies, did autopsies, and the autopsies said that they had all died of hypothermia, except for Ludmilla, who had a heart attack. They all had bruised lungs and also a deficiency of protein due to malnutrition, which was listed as a contributing factor. The deaths were ultimately ruled accidental, and when she came out and said what happened, the autopsy reports and her account of what happened, that's kind of what sparked a lot of theories, because it doesn't seem to really match up, because she had even said they had breakfast, and then they started down. They had just had a big breakfast. They woke up, they made a fire, they had breakfast, and then they started down, and that's when everything started happening. So, and
these people are malnourished,
protein deficiency from malnourishment, which is I don't know. Well, I don't know if they eat lightly when they do hiking. I don't know.
Did they mention the lady who was clawing out her throat and banging her head? Were there any injuries like that listed, or nothing of that nature?
It said basically hypothermia and protein deficiency were the main things listed, and then for Ludmilla was the heart attack.
So,
and obviously,
that's weird. Because
I think the one girl would probably be, more blunt force trauma. Yeah. Because that's probably a contributing factor, I would think, if she was bashing her head in.
Yeah, because it sounds like they didn't even make it past the next day, if that makes sense. Because remember, it did this big rainstorm, right? And so they were all drenched. It sounds like they probably died from that, from being frozen, from the rainstorm being all soaked and stuff. But then it's just kind of odd that she would be oh yeah, we kept going. We had the next day, we ate food, we went, and then they died. It's I can't discount it because, like I said, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it would be weird to just, I don't know. If you were in that position, I don't know. So
based on what you've heard so far, what would you, if you had to theorize something, what would you think? Like
I said, when you said it rained, they probably all froze to death in the night, basically.
I mean, knowing what you know about the autopsies and the account, because you don't usually freeze to death and start dropping and convulsing and bleeding from your face. And
well, I personally don't believe in the convulsing story because it seems.
Do you think she's lying about it? Or,
maybe,
or so traumatized that
it's either
warped?
Yeah. I mean, it's either a traumatized thing or. I mean, I don't want to be
insensitive.
I don't want to be insensitive, but it's possible that it's an attention thing. Because, I mean, I've seen stories where people lie about all sorts of crazy stuff to get attention. But I don't know, because I didn't dive into this. You did, so you know more about the people than I do. But it seems iffy. So, like, but if it is actually 100% true, then I have no clue. That's like weird tree demons or something. Like, if that actually happened, I have no clue. Maybe she tracked people up the mountain to kill them, but she just accidentally ate the wrong thing. Right? One of the meals isn't poisoned, but you messed up, and then everyone else got poisoned except for the wrong person. Yeah.
But what's the motive?
I don't know, for fun.
So she's like a psychopath.
Yeah, I don't know. I think overall, I don't know. It just seems kind of iffy. Do
you want to hear some of the main theories?
Hit me.
Okay. One popular theory is that her story was inaccurate, like you said. You know, maybe she faked it or got it wrong. And so, like, obviously, when people go through a traumatic experience,
they just see something different, or their brain tries to...
A lot of times, you will misremember or fill in gaps or things. Especially, I feel like if you waited, like, 2 years to actually get it out, you have a lot of time to mull it over. Yeah. And kind of your brain will try to make sense of things that don't
solidify that fake memory type thing.
Yeah. It could be that she got things wrong, or she ended up exaggerating things, or like a mixture of both, where she misremembered something and then it got exaggerated. So it could be something like that. Right. And it could be that they did die from hypothermia and malnutrition, and she's just mixing up everything else. Right. It could be.
Do you know how old the tour guide was? Probably 40s-ish?
I think 41. Okay. She's 41. So, I also forgot to mention earlier that some of the people had started, like, pulling their clothes off before they died. So that was probably contributing to the hypothermia thing. Because that happens a lot.
Your body does that crazy thing where you start overheating.
Yeah, where you start feeling warm all of a sudden, so you start, even though you're freezing.
You know, that actually might make sense, because, like, it's kind of like what you said, where, like, when you're under a lot of stress, or you can, like, misremember stuff. So she's around all these people who are, freezing to death, and they're literally like, oh my god, it's so hot, and they start, like, ripping clothes off, so your brain's like, oh, they're being, like, they're acting weird, they're acting strange type thing, and you just fill it in later after you've had this, like, mental break of, oh, they were, like, seizuring, they were, you know.
But like, what I wonder is, because she said that they had built a fire and had breakfast and then started down. So it seems like if there had been a fire made, there would be evidence of it even after a few weeks. There's probably a spot where they had fire, you know, and you'd be able to tell. And if they did have a fire going to make a breakfast, you'd probably find some kind of stomach contents. I don't know, maybe not after that long. But
well, I mean, I don't know.
I don't know, but it seems like you would at least be able to find some fire remains. And if that's true, then how would they die of hypothermia if they were, like,
next to a fire? Right.
I mean, I feel like it would take a lot longer than just walking a little down the hill from your fire to start freezing to death. And it's not even like it's freezing on the mountain. Right. It's just like, that's another thing. It was like middle of August. And it was like higher up, obviously, but it's not like to where you'd be freezing that quickly. It's not like you're on Mount Everest or anything. Right. And they were on the descent. So. Right. So I don't know if hypothermia really, well, I guess they said signs of it, so I guess it would have to be something, or it has to be something that exhibits things that look like hypothermia.
I mean, it does get cold. I mean, even around here, it's only like,
or something else that makes you. Something. But I don't know, like, how they determine that in an autopsy. Like, does it show up on your bones or something? I don't know either. So basically, that's one of the theories, is that she misremembered or fabricated things. A different one is that perhaps the Russian military was conducting some kind of experiments, and they witnessed stuff and then were killed and then had a cover-up to, you know, cover up what they witnessed. So
why'd they let her go?
Well, that's a good question. Basically, because the group had a route they were going down and they deviated a little bit because they went and decided to stop and camp in this place where they weren't going to be initially to recoup a little bit. And so they didn't stick straight to the route that they were going to be on. People are like, well, maybe, they went through this other place that was the middle of something that was like a military zone thing that they didn't know about, and that they happened upon something. The only thing is that, like you said,
if they're willing to kill all those people, why not her?
There is a survivor. That's one thing. Like, why would you leave someone alive for that?
Right.
The other thing is that the place that they died was like an open area and it was very visible. Like, it was visible enough that you could see it from the air. Like, they brought helicopters in to find the bodies. Mm-hmm. And you could see it from higher ground, too. So, if you're, like, doing a top secret military, like, covert,
right,
operation.
Let's put it on this mountain where a lot of people like to hike.
In the middle of a mountain and right there on the top part where it's all open and everyone can see it really easily.
Right. They'll never expect us to put it in the open.
Well, like, unless you're testing some kind of invisibility cloak
sure.
or something, or invisibility dome. Yeah. Like, it seems like an awful.
That's why we haven't found Bigfoot. They gave the invisibility dome to Bigfoot. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So that's basically, some people have that theory, but then those are like the rebuttals where it's like, well, she survived and why? And also, why would they be in that location? It's kind of an unlikely location for something top secret, it seems like. I don't know. Maybe it's like a reverse psychology or something. Yeah. But it seems like a bad spot.
Why are they just flexing on this woman for no reason? Right. We killed all your friends. Okay. What do you think about that?
This is the one that I think sounds more intriguing. Mm-hmm. The other theory is that they were killed by a nerve agent.
Hey, I mentioned that earlier.
Yeah. Basically, people have brought forth that the symptoms of the deaths that she describes
right,
are consistent with the effects of different types of chemical toxin, like nerve agent gases and stuff, which is like the frothing at the mouth and convulsing that's seen in a lot of cases where people are poisoned by gas. Also coincides with some of the autopsy results too, because people who die from poisoning via nerve gas, they do a lot of times have bruising on their lungs.
Okay.
And it can also cause heart attacks because it can induce cardiac arrest.
Right.
And so that could explain why they were bruised and why she apparently had a heart attack. And she was older than that, so she'd probably be more likely to have a heart attack than just be bruised. Mm-hmm. Another part of the theory is that it can match up to nerve gas because if you're exposed to that kind of thing and you fall and you convulse and then you're knocked unconscious, you might not die right away, but you are rendered unconscious and you are in the top of the mountain right there, it kind of exposed to the elements for a while. That could result in the hypothermia that happens later because, they were up there for a while. So if she was gone, for 2 days or something, and then they were just knocked out cold and then couldn't, basically comatose, and you're out in the elements, then you could potentially have been knocked out by the nerve gas, but then died because of the hypothermia.
Okay.
From being exposed to the elements while you're comatose. So that could be a thing that happened, which would explain the bruising and the hypothermia that was present in the autopsy.
I suppose. I don't know why I didn't get her.
Well, yeah, that's a question. There was, because I heard a couple people talk about this on YouTube, and like one obviously was Wendigoon, and the other was Cadaber. And in Cadaber's video, he mentioned his own kind of theory, and he said that there's a gas called Novichok, and it's a class of nerve agents that was created by Soviet Russia, the Soviet Union, and they're considered some of the deadliest ones to exist, and they were reportedly tested out in the mountains. When you're exposed to that particular gas, it can exhibit a lot of the same side effects and rapid death, similar to what happened to them, because it seems like for all intents and purposes they pretty much started convulsing and then they went down. The thing that I thought was interesting is that Wendigoon also talked about this.
Shout out to Wendigoon, by the way.
Yeah. He was talking about how maybe, and I don't remember if it was his theory or if he had heard it somewhere else,
Okay.
but I heard it in his video. Maybe, because the weather had initially been clear and sunny and, forecasted to stay that way. If there had been nerve agent tests done in the area previously, and that kind of stuff tends to be heavier in the atmosphere, it doesn't really kind of disperse right away, maybe, since they were in that clearing and it was up more in an elevated area and they were on the slope going down, there was still kind of residue in the atmosphere from those tests. And so when the storm came unexpectedly and it starts raining a ton, then the next morning, all the it's, how it is after it rains.
Yeah.
The atmosphere is a lot lower. Everything's getting pushed down more.
Yeah, the roads are all smoky with the sun coming out.
So basically, what if it was like the nerve gas that was kind of suspended in the atmosphere still was pushed down and starts going down the hill? And so he was talking about how what could have maybe happened in theory is that it basically started coming down the mountain, kind of like this deadly fog cloud kind of mist thing. And so that's why it would make sense that the guy in the very back of the group starts screaming first, and then subsequently everyone who goes back there to try to see what's going on gets hit next. And then it's just like this deadly thing that
what about those people who ran away?
Right, but they eventually ran, and they were like running, but they got overtaken, basically.
Yeah, but that one lady was just standing there, and the other guy was hiding behind a rock.
Right, but she was farther along. Because I don't think they were all standing next to each other. They were kind of in different spots.
Right, it's a hiking party. Everyone's kind of...
And I don't know, because that's all based on her and where she said they all were. So maybe she was farther away than she remembers. I don't know.
Right.
And so it's like, it's not perfect theory. But...
right, yeah. Hence why it's a theory.
But yeah, if you could imagine just this thing, kind of invisible thing, rolling down the mountainside. And... it's kind of just swallowing people up, but they can't see what it is.
So the idea is that the Russian government is doing these like nerve gas tests.
Or they had in the past, and it was still like, because it was 1993,
right?
But that wasn't that much after that when they were testing things.
Because if things go in the atmosphere, don't they move with like?
I don't know. That's why I mean it's theory,
right?
But I think they hang a little lower because they're generally like heavier.
I guess, but yeah, I mean. Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I would figure if something was like in the clouds in the atmosphere and all that stuff, it would just kind of move with the natural like wind and stuff. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. They said it could have settled more on the top of the mountain, and then since the weather's pretty good there most of the time during those months, doesn't really kind of just settles up there, and then all the unexpected rain starts pushing it down.
Right.
And so basically. Everyone started getting overtaken, and then the guy that she was with at the end, Dennis, he like starts dropping, and she didn't stop to go back for him.
Right, everyone she's literally with him.
Everyone else had stopped and turned around and tried to help whoever was like behind them. Basically, they fell, and she didn't stop running. She kept running and kept running and kept running. So she like got down, and then she stopped. So the theory is that maybe she outran whatever the thing was. It just didn't quite get to her, and then by the time she went back up there, the next day or whatever, like hours and hours later, it had actually been dispersed because it had been washed out with the rain and the fog and everything. Of all those, I think that one sounds the most, or like a combination of maybe that, like that makes most sense to like what was like the body's condition and what she said she saw. But it really all hinges on like if she saw what she saw.
I'm still going with the I think they just froze to death, but who knows?
But the thing is, how would they freeze to death if nothing happened to them first?
They got drenched.
Yeah, but she was wet too.
Yeah. So
she ran all the way down there, and if they had just built the fire. Like, that's what I need to know. I need to know if they found fire remains. I don't know. I didn't read anything about that. I wonder if they actually noted anything like that. Because it seems like they would be... Well,
plus, if they were dying of hypothermia, they'd probably all be, like, somewhat together. I would assume. because I would assume you die from hypothermia at night because the sun's not out to even like help at all.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly what the temperature was like when they were like during the day, but that just seems weird for people to all drop at the same time.
Yeah, it's definitely odd. Well, I mean, you're also assuming that, you know, you're taking her.
Yeah, well, they're like looking at the bodies, I would think, and then like Ludmilla was collapsed on top of Alex, and so they must have died pretty much around the same time, because that would be kind of weird otherwise. Mm-hmm. It's like he would have died and she would have waited and then laid on top of him. That's weird. Mm-hmm. Then, you know, the girl with bashed out forehead. Yeah. Well, according to the other girl, but I'm assuming they would have found her skeleton like on the rock. Yeah. That's what I mean. I want to see the reports, but I can't read Russian.
I have to dig into it a little bit more.
Yeah, I've tried to do some digging, but it's really hard, and I've never done it before. Yeah. And it's like my first time trying. I think I'll get better at it. That's about as deep as I could get.
Oh, that's definitely interesting.
There was also like theories about like maybe they ate something that was poisonous.
Like I said, she was trying to poison him. She just messed up the thing.
Well, I mean,
she brings up all those hikers
like a motive, though.
And goes, "Okay, I'm going to kill all these people. Right? They're all going to die. Okay, I got these 6 meals here. I'm going to put the poison in that one and that one and that one. I got to not put in that one because I got to eat that one." And then the first guy falls and she's like, "Shit."
I mean, I'm assuming they probably had a communal pot that they would just cook things in and not just make all these separate little meals.
Yeah, exactly. She had her own.
She's just like, yeah, I'll just have my own little cauldron.
I'll just have my own little thing here. Yeah.
It's nothing nefarious.
Don't worry about it. Well, that was our first episode. It was a little slapdash, but yeah, we're gonna come back soon. I am looking at hadron colliders or something. I was reading something about that piqued my interest, so I'll dive into that and see if it's worth talking about. But yeah, thank you for listening to the first ever opinion pending podcast that we did. Yeah, hopefully it wasn't horrible and you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.